The fluorescent lights of Oak Ridge County Courthouse cast a harsh glare on the polished wooden surfaces, creating an atmosphere that was both clinical and oppressive. Judge Robert Hartley adjusted his reading glasses, his weathered hands betraying years of judicial authority that had become almost mythical in the local legal community. Samantha Williams stood at the defense table, her posture a perfect blend of professional composure and barely contained passion. Her client, Marcus Thompson, a 22-year-old community college student, sat beside her with a mixture of hope and anxiety etched across his young face. The case seemed simple on the surface, a minor traffic violation that had escalated into a complex legal challenge. But Samantha knew it was about so much more than a simple traffic stop. This was about systemic inequity, about a young black man caught in a system designed to break rather than rebuild. "Your Honor," Samantha began, her voice clear and deliberate, "the evidence clearly shows that the initial traffic stop was conducted without probable cause. My client was profiled, pure and simple." Judge Hartley's eyes narrowed. He had heard these arguments countless times before. Young lawyers thinking they could challenge the system with passionate speeches and selective interpretation of the law. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped tightly together. He was the first in his family to pursue higher education, working 2 jobs while studying criminal justice. The irony of his current situation was not lost on him. Samantha pulled out a series of documents, police reports, dashboard camera footage, witness statements. Each page was a carefully constructed argument challenging the fundamental fairness of the arrest. Mr. Thompson was driving home from his night shift at the community center, she continued, when he was pulled over for an alleged improper lane change. The dashcam footage shows no such violation occurred. Judge Hartley's fingers drummed against the bench, a rhythmic display of growing irritation. He had seen countless attorneys try to grandstand in his courtroom, and Samantha Williams was presenting a performance worthy of the most dramatic legal dramas. "Ms. Williams," he interrupted, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the courtroom, "are you suggesting that Officer Roberts deliberately fabricated this traffic stop?" The question hung in the air, laden with potential consequences. Accusing a police officer of deliberate misconduct was no small matter. Samantha met the judge's gaze without flinching. "I'm suggesting that the evidence speaks for itself, Your Honor. The dashcam footage, the lack of any legitimate reason for the stop, the subsequent search that found nothing. These are facts, not accusations." Marcus leaned closer to her, whispering, "Ms. Williams, please. I can't afford more legal trouble. I've got my scholarship to think about." The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, tension building with each passing moment. Judge Hartley's reputation was well known. He was old school, conservative, and rarely swayed by emotional arguments. When he finally spoke, his words fell like hammers. "Ms. Williams, while your presentation is passionate, the court finds sufficient grounds to uphold the original charges. Mr. Thompson will be fined $1,500 and will have 3 points added to his driving record." The gavel came down with a thunderous crack. Marcus's face crumpled. Samantha's professional mask remained intact, but her eyes betrayed a burning determination. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was personal. Little did Judge Hartley know that this moment would become a turning point, not just in Marcus Thompson's life, but in his own. The courtroom emptied, but the echoes of justice denied continued to reverberate. The downtown legal office of Williams and Associates was a modest space, a testament to Samantha's commitment to community justice rather than personal wealth. Worn leather chairs, walls lined with law books, and a single window overlooking the bustling street below. This was her sanctuary and battlefield. Samantha dropped her briefcase with a heavy sigh, the weight of the day's court defeat pressing down on her shoulders. Her assistant, Alina Rodriguez, approached with a concerned look and a steaming cup of coffee. "That bad?" Elena asked, knowing full well the answer. Samantha nodded, pulling out her phone to check her messages. 3 missed calls from her mother, 2 from her younger brother Michael's college financial aid office. "I need to make some calls," she muttered, her mind already calculating the financial implications of the day's court ruling. Her mother, Gloria Williams, had been battling kidney disease for the past 2 years. Medical bills were astronomical, and Samantha had been the family's primary financial support. Each lost case, each unfair ruling, was more than just a professional setback. It was a direct hit to their fragile economic stability. She dialed her mother's number, forcing a cheerful tone. "Hey, Mom, how are you feeling today?" Gloria's tired voice came through. "Samantha, honey, don't worry about me. How was your day?" The irony wasn't lost on Samantha. Here she was, a Harvard-educated attorney, fighting systemic injustice, yet struggling to keep her own family afloat. The court's ruling against Marcus would mean less money for her mother's medical treatments, less support for her brother's education. Her brother Michael was just one semester away from completing his criminal justice degree, a dream they'd both worked tirelessly to achieve. He was working part-time at a local community center, tutoring at-risk youth, determined to make a difference. As she reviewed the financial spreadsheet, the numbers seemed to mock her. Medical expenses, tuition, office overhead, pro bono work. It was a delicate balance that was constantly on the verge of collapse. Elena interrupted her thoughts. "The Thompson case file is on your desk. I've already started preparing the appeal documentation." Samantha smiled weakly. Elena had been more than an assistant. She was a lifeline, understanding the deeper mission behind their legal work. "We can't let this go," Samantha said, more to herself than to Elena. "This is bigger than just one case. It's about a system that's fundamentally broken." Her phone buzzed again. A text from Michael. "Got some good news. The community center might offer me a full-time position after graduation." A moment of hope in a day filled with challenges. As evening approached, Samantha began drafting the appeal for Marcus's case. Each word was a weapon, each legal argument a shield against a system designed to suppress rather than support. She thought about her own journey, a black woman who had fought tooth and nail to get where she was. Her parents had sacrificed everything to give her and Michael opportunities they never had. Failure was not an option. The office grew quiet, the city lights flickering outside. Samantha worked, surrounded by case files, medical bills, and a determination that burned brighter than the streetlights below. She didn't know it yet, but this seemingly ordinary evening was the calm before a storm that would change everything: her career, her understanding of justice, and her connection to the very judge who had ruled against her that morning. The appeal was more than a legal document. It was a declaration of hope, a promise that justice could still prevail. The night was unusually cold for early autumn, with a sharp wind cutting through the streets of downtown. Samantha's phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m., an unknown number that typically would have gone unanswered, but something made her pause. "Ms. Williams?" A gravelly voice spoke, barely above a whisper. "I have information about the Thompson case that you need to hear." The caller identified himself as Robert Jennings, a retired police records clerk who had worked in the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department for over 3 decades. His voice carried the weight of someone with secrets long buried. "Meet me at the old Riverside Diner," he said. "Come alone, and don't tell anyone." Samantha's legal instincts immediately went into overdrive. She knew the risks of such clandestine meetings, but the possibility of breakthrough evidence was too compelling to ignore. The Riverside Diner was a relic of another era. Chrome fixtures, vinyl booths worn thin by decades of local gossip and late-night conversations. When Samantha arrived, Robert Jennings was already seated in the darkest corner, a manila folder tucked carefully beneath a worn leather briefcase. "I've seen things," Jennings began, his hands trembling slightly as he pushed a series of photocopied documents across the table. Things that never made it into official reports. The documents revealed a pattern of systemic misconduct within the Oak Ridge County law enforcement. Redacted reports, suppressed evidence, a network of cover-ups that ran deeper than Samantha could have imagined. But it was a particular photograph that caught her attention. A young man who looked strikingly familiar, standing next to a police cruiser. Something about his eyes, the set of his jaw, triggered a memory Samantha couldn't quite place. "This goes beyond Marcus Thompson," Jennings whispered. "There's a connection that goes back years. Judge Hartley's past. It's not what everyone thinks." Before Samantha could press further, Jennings slid a small USB drive across the table. "Everything you need to know is on this, but be careful. Some secrets are dangerous." The meeting was brief, no more than 15 minutes, but it would change everything. Driving home, Samantha's mind raced. The USB drive sat on the passenger seat, a potential Pandora's box of hidden truths. She thought about her brother Michael, about his passion for justice, about the countless cases where the system had failed those who needed it most. Her phone rang. It was Michael. "Sam, you're not going to believe what I found," he said, his voice excited. "I've been doing some research for my criminal justice thesis, and I've uncovered something strange about some old court cases." Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of something?" "A pattern," Michael continued. "Cases involving Judge Hartley. It's like there's a hidden story nobody's talking about." The pieces were beginning to align. The mysterious documents from Jennings, Michael's research, the nagging feeling that the Thompson case was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. As she pulled into her apartment complex, Samantha noticed a dark sedan parked across the street. Its windows were tinted, its presence seemingly innocuous, but something felt wrong. She grabbed the USB drive, tucking it into her jacket pocket. Whatever secrets it contained, someone clearly didn't want them to come to light. The night air felt charged with anticipation. Samantha Williams was about to uncover a truth that would shake the foundations of Oak Ridge County's judicial system, a truth that connected her own family's history to Judge Hartley in ways she could never have imagined. Samantha's home office was a sanctuary of organized chaos. Law books stacked meticulously, case files arranged with surgical precision, and a court board that had become her personal investigation hub. The USB drive from Robert Jennings sat like a silent time bomb, waiting to be explored. Her laptop hummed to life, fingers trembling slightly as she inserted the drive. The first few files were mundane, old police reports, shift logs, seemingly innocuous documentation. But then, buried deep in a subfolder marked with a cryptic date, a series of photographs began to tell a different story. The first image was grainy, taken in what appeared to be a rehabilitation center from the late 1990s. A young man sat near a window, his profile hauntingly familiar. Dark hair, intense eyes, a set to his jaw that Samantha recognized from somewhere deep in her memory. Beside the photograph was a partially redacted medical file. The name was mostly blacked out, but two words caught her attention: Michael and Hartley. Her brother Michael burst through the door, interrupting her concentration. "Sam, you won't believe what I found in the university archives." He stopped, noticing her intense focus. "What's going on?" Samantha wordlessly pointed to the photograph. Michael leaned in, his breath catching. "That looks like, but that's impossible." The photograph bore an uncanny resemblance to a picture in their family album, a young man who had been a ghost in their family's history. Their mother had always been reluctant to discuss him, changing the subject whenever his name came up. "I've been tracing some old court records," Michael said, spreading out his own research. "There's a connection between Judge Hartley and a rehabilitation program from years ago. A program that seems to have disappeared from official records." As they compared notes, a more complex narrative began to emerge. The young man in the photograph wasn't just another case file. He was someone who had been deliberately erased from official history. Samantha's phone rang. It was Gloria, their mother, her voice unusually tense. "Samantha, come home. There's something I need to tell you." The Williams family home was a modest brick house in a quiet neighborhood, preserving decades of carefully guarded secrets. When Samantha and Michael arrived, their mother sat in her favorite armchair, an old photograph album open on her lap. "I should have told you both years ago," Gloria began, her voice breaking. "The young man in those photographs, he's connected to Judge Hartley in a way you can't imagine." The story unfolded like a complex legal brief. Years ago, Gloria had worked as a social worker in a community rehabilitation program. A young man, troubled, lost, with connections to powerful people, had been part of her caseload. A young man who shared more than just a passing resemblance to the photographs they'd discovered. His name was David, Gloria whispered. David Hartley. Judge Hartley's son, who disappeared years ago under circumstances nobody fully understood. The pieces were beginning to align. A missing son, a hidden history, a connection that ran deeper than a simple court case. Samantha's mind raced. The Thompson case, the mysterious USB drive, the photographs, they were all threads of a much larger tapestry. Outside, the same dark Satan from the previous night slowly drove past the house. Someone was watching. Someone was afraid of what might be uncovered. "We're just getting started," Samantha said, her voice a mixture of determination and barely contained excitement. The photograph continued to stare back at them, a silent witness to a story that was about to be blown wide open. The Oak Ridge County Judicial Building stood like a monument to institutional power, its granite facade unmoved by the personal dramas that played out within its walls. Samantha Williams walked up the steps with calculated precision, a manila folder tucked beneath her arm containing the most explosive evidence she'd ever assembled. Her plan was audacious, a direct confrontation with Judge Robert Hartley in his own chambers. The secretary looked up, surprised. "Ms. Williams, the judge doesn't have any scheduled meetings." Samantha's smile was razor sharp. "This isn't a scheduled meeting. This is a matter of judicial integrity." Something in her tone made the secretary hesitate. The door to Hartley's chambers opened almost immediately. Judge Hartley looked older than he had in the courtroom, the harsh fluorescent lights revealing every line, every shadow of a man carrying hidden burdens. His steel-gray eyes locked onto Samantha with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed tension. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice a low rumble, "I assume this isn't about another appeal." She placed the photographs on his desk, images of David Hartley, medical records, rehabilitation center documents. Each piece of evidence was a carefully placed chess piece. "Who is David?" Samantha asked, watching his reaction carefully. For a moment, the judge's composure cracked. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as he reached for a photograph of a young man who looked hauntingly similar to himself. "Some stories," Hartley began, "are better left in the past." Samantha wasn't backing down. "This is about more than just a past. This is about justice, about Marcus Thompson, about the systemic failures that destroy lives." The conversation became a verbal chess match. Hartley revealed fragments. David had struggled with addiction, had been part of a rehabilitation program that promised transformation but delivered little. He had disappeared years ago, leaving behind a family fractured by disappointment and unspoken pain. "My son was more than just a case file," Hartley said, his voice breaking. "He was a brilliant young man destroyed by a system that promised help but offered only judgment." Samantha recognized the pain. It mirrored her own family's struggles, the thin line between opportunity and destruction that many young people of color navigated daily. "The Thompson case," she pressed, "is it about justice or about maintaining a system that continues to fail?" Hartley's response was unexpected. He pulled out an old file, dusty and worn. "Some failures run deeper than a single court ruling. Some mistakes cannot be undone." The photograph of David seemed to watch them, a silent witness to a conversation decades in the making. Outside the chambers, a storm was brewing, literal and metaphorical. Dark clouds gathered, and the building seemed to hold its breath. "What really happened to David?" Samantha asked, her voice a mix of professional determination and personal empathy. Hartley's response was a whisper. "Not everything lost can be found. Not every story has a clean resolution." But Samantha knew this was just the beginning. The photographs, the hidden documents, the connection between their families, it was all leading to something bigger. As she left his chambers, Hartley called after her. "Be careful, Ms. Williams. Some truths are dangerous when they see the light." The hallway echoed with unspoken secrets. The judicial building, with its marble floors and imposing architecture, held its breath. The confrontation was over, but the real battle was just beginning. The community center where Michael worked was a beacon of hope in one of Oak Ridge's most challenging neighborhoods. Concrete walls covered in vibrant murals told stories of resilience, of community, of survival against impossible odds. Samantha arrived unannounced, her mind still reeling from the confrontation with Judge Hartley. Michael was leading a group counseling session for at-risk youth, his passion evident in every gesture, every word of encouragement. "We're more than our circumstances," Michael was telling a group of teenagers. "Each of you has a story waiting to be written." When the session ended, he pulled his sister into a quiet office. The walls were covered with photographs of community programs, success stories of young people who had beaten the odds. "The rehabilitation program David was part of," Michael said, spreading out a series of documents, "it wasn't just another government initiative. It was connected to a specific community intervention project that Mom worked on years ago." A photograph caught Samantha's eye. Gloria, looking decades younger, standing with a group of social workers and what appeared to be rehabilitation counselors. In the background, partially obscured, was a younger Robert Hartley. The pieces were beginning to align in a way that defied simple explanation. Michael's research revealed a complex network. The rehabilitation program had been an experimental approach funded by a combination of judicial grants and community investments. Its goal was to provide comprehensive support for young people at the intersection of legal challenges and personal struggles. David wasn't just another case, Michael explained. He was part of a larger experiment in community intervention, but something went wrong. A sealed file, marked with a confidential stamp, told a fragmented story. David Hartley had been part of a pilot program designed to provide holistic support for young people facing addiction and legal challenges. Gloria Williams had been a key social worker in the program. The connection was deeper than they had imagined. As they dug deeper, a pattern emerged. The program had shown initial promise, reducing recidivism, helping young people rebuild their lives. But something had happened, something that had been carefully erased from official records. Samantha's phone buzzed. It was Robert Jennings, the retired records clerk. "You're getting close," his message read. "But be careful. Some people don't want this story told." That evening, Gloria invited them for dinner. The family meal felt charged with unspoken history. Gloria moved differently, her movements more deliberate, as if the weight of years of secrets was finally becoming unbearable. "I knew David," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Not just as a case, as a person who was fighting for his life. The story began to unfold. David had been more than just Judge Hartley's son. He had been a promising young activist, working to create change in the very system that would ultimately consume him. Michael found a hidden folder on his laptop, encrypted files that spoke of a larger conspiracy. The rehabilitation program had uncovered systemic issues that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. "This is bigger than Marcus Thompson's case," Samantha realized. "This is about a system designed to break people rather than rebuild them." As night fell, the Williams family sat surrounded by documents, photographs, and the weight of a story waiting to be told. The connection between Judge Hartley, David, and their own family was becoming clearer. But with clarity came danger. The dark Satan that had been following Samantha now parked across the street, its presence a silent threat. Something was coming, and nothing would remain the same. The Oak Ridge County Courthouse had never seen anything like this hearing. Judge Robert Hartley sat at the bench, but he was no longer the same man who had presided over cases with cold detachment. Stacks of case files surrounded him, years of rulings now under intense scrutiny. Samantha Williams stood before him, not as an adversary, but as an unexpected ally in a mission of judicial redemption. "I've reviewed every case from the past 15 years, Hartley began, his voice carrying a weight of profound remorse. "The patterns are undeniable." Michael sat in the gallery, documenting every moment. The community center's legal advocacy team had been instrumental in compiling the data, years of biased rulings, disproportionate sentencing, systemic injustices that had destroyed countless lives. The hearing was unprecedented. What had started as an investigation into Marcus Thompson's case had become a comprehensive review of the entire judicial system's approach to marginalized communities. Hartley pulled out a series of graphs, stark visual representations of racial disparities in sentencing. Each chart was a damning indictment of a system he had once blindly served. "My son David," he said, his voice breaking, "he understood these injustices long before I was willing to see them." The courtroom was packed. Local activists, legal scholars, families who had been victims of systemic bias, all watched in stunned silence. Samantha presented a comprehensive report. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a meticulously documented path to reform. Each recommendation was backed by data, by personal stories, by a vision of justice that transcended racial and socioeconomic boundaries. "This isn't about punishment," she explained. "This is about restoration, about understanding that every case represents a human life, not just a file number." Michael's research played a crucial role. The community intervention models they had studied showed alternative approaches to justice, approaches focused on rehabilitation, education, and genuine community support. The most powerful moment came when Marcus Thompson was called to speak. The young man who had been at the center of this journey stood tall, his story now a catalyst for systemic change. "I never wanted to be a statistic," Marcus said. "I wanted to be seen as a human being with potential." Hartley's transformation was visible. The judge who had once been a symbol of systemic oppression was now becoming an instrument of change. He announced a series of groundbreaking initiatives: a comprehensive review of past cases, mandatory cultural competency training for all judicial staff, creation of a community oversight committee, establishment of a rehabilitation and support fund. The local media dubbed it the Hartley Reforms, a term that would have been unimaginable months earlier. Gloria Williams watched from the back of the courtroom, tears in her eyes. The work she had started decades ago was finally bearing fruit. As the hearing concluded, Samantha approached Hartley. The tension between them had transformed into a shared commitment to justice. "David would be proud," she said softly. Hartley nodded, a lifetime of unspoken pain and potential finally finding resolution. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. What had begun as Marcus Thompson's individual case had become a movement. Activists, community leaders, families who had been failed by the system, all united in a moment of hope. Michael captured the moment on his camera, a visual testament to the power of persistence, of understanding, of true justice. The dark sit-in that had been following Samantha was gone. The shadows of the past were finally giving way to light. A new chapter was beginning. 1 year later, the not-for-sale community center stood as a testament to transformation. What was once an abandoned warehouse was now a beacon of hope, funded by the Judicial Reform Settlement and powered by the collective energy of those who had fought for change. Marcus Thompson cut the ribbon at the center's opening, surrounded by the very community that had supported his journey. He was no longer just a case file. He was now the center's first program director, focusing on youth legal education and community advocacy. Judge Robert Hartley, now retired from the bench, sat in the front row. His transformation was complete, from a symbol of systemic injustice to a committed advocate for meaningful change. Samantha Williams took the podium, her speech a powerful reflection of their collective journey. "This isn't just a building," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the packed room. "This is a promise that justice isn't about punishment, but about restoration." The center represented more than just a physical space. It was a comprehensive support system, offering legal advice, educational support, mental health resources, and job training. Each program was designed to address the root causes of community challenges. Michael had developed a groundbreaking curriculum that was now being adopted by universities and community organizations nationwide. His research on community intervention had become a blueprint for systemic change. Gloria Williams, seated next to her children, represented the generational struggle that had led to this moment. Her work as a social worker decades ago had planted seeds that were now bearing fruit. The most unexpected transformation was David Hartley's story. Through extensive research and investigation, they had discovered that he hadn't disappeared. He had gone underground, working on community reform from the shadows. Photographs and documents revealed a man who had been fighting the system long before the current movement began. A special memorial wall honored those who had been victims of systemic injustice, a powerful reminder of the work still to be done. The settlement from the judicial review had created a substantial fund, not just for compensation, but for genuine community investment. Scholarships, small business support, legal aid, a comprehensive approach to addressing generational inequity. As the ceremony concluded, Marcus approached Samantha and Judge Hartley. The symbolism was powerful. A young black man, a white former judge, and the attorney who had brought them together. "This is what justice really looks like," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion. The dark Satan that had once followed Samantha was now a distant memory. The shadows of institutional racism were being pushed back, one community at a time. That evening, at a small family gathering, the Williams family reflected on their journey. The photographs that had once held hidden secrets now told a story of hope and transformation. "We didn't just win a case," Samantha told her brother. "We changed a system." Michael nodded, showing her the latest data. Reduced recidivism rates, increased educational opportunities, community-driven legal reforms. The numbers told a story of real change. As night fell, the not-for-sale community center stood illuminated, a beacon of what was possible when people chose understanding over judgment, restoration over punishment. The journey had been long, painful, complicated, but hope had prevailed. And this was just the beginning. Outside, the first stars began to shine, witnesses to a transformation that would ripple through generations. Justice, they had learned, was not a destination. It was a continuous journey of understanding, healing, and collective growth.